or rather with groups of members. The first one deals with Ramakatsa has 2 extra charges, apart from those that affect everyone else or some of them. The first one deals with addressing a meeting of counter-revolutionary forces on the 31st of January 2015. The NDC raised the question with the National Prosecutor as to the competence of this charge in light of the fact that the alleged transgression occurred on 31st January 2015 before the adoption of the Code of Revolutionary Discipline on 8 February 2015. The response was that it fell within the period when the old disciplinary code was still operational per NPA resolution. To avoid this debate and without deciding the question of timeliness, we choose to anchor this transgression directly on Section 6.6 of the Constitution, which is cited in the charge sheet sent to Ramakatsa. This section enjoins EFF members to put the interests of the EFF above any other political considerations, and that all members may not join, participate, or associate in any organization and activities whose aims and objectives are inconsistent and contradictory with those of the EFF. In the circumstances, and even if it could have been argued by the charged members, if he had chosen to participate in the proceedings, that the Code of Revolutionary Practice did not, strictly speaking, cover his transgression, we hold that it is sufficiently covered by the Constitution itself and indeed by the previous code. We accordingly find Ramakatsa guilty of this offense. Excuse me. Got a new copy fresh from the press. Paragraph 84, we accordingly find Ramakatsa guilty of this offense. Then the second separate charge or charge that related only to Ramakatsa was the charge on media interviews. Second charge involves comments allegedly made by Ramakatsa in the public domain in interviews with the Citizen newspaper, Lesedi FM and Power FM, concerning his views on the proceedings of the MPA. Although we were supplied with audio evidence of specifically the Power FM interview, we find Ramakatsa not guilty of this particular charge on the basis that it is a duplication of charge 4, which deals with the media conference of 17 February 2015. In all the said interviews, as well as the media conference, more or less the same allegations were made. It would be quite inappropriate to charge a person separately in respect of each follow-up interview with each media house if the content of the utterances is largely similar. He is accordingly found not guilty on that charge. Then we go to Andile Mutama. Mutama faces 4 additional charges apart from those that affect other people. The first, charge 1, relates to the alleged abandonment of the commission on the 15th of December. This matter has already been discussed above at paragraphs 39 and 40, and the member was found not guilty due to the technicality that it took place on the day before the adoption of the Constitution. It may be convenient at this stage to quickly dispose of another additional charge, namely charge 8, related to alleged use of social media platforms and discrediting the leadership. The only evidence presented to support this charge is one Twitter message which reads thus, quote, "For me, the question is very easy. Why is the EFF leadership dragging us all through this to defend a convicted murderer? This is my only issue," unquote. Although it is suggestive, we find that this message standing alone does not justify a conviction on this charge. The member is accordingly found not guilty on this charge. Then the last 2 extra charges from Mutama are theft of EFF financial documents. Perhaps the most serious allegations made against Mutama alone relate to the evidence of Baloyi and the removal of official documents from the EFF office into the hands of a rival opposition party which is in competition with the EFF. Baloyi's evidence was dedicated to the issues raised in this charge. This evidence has already been outlined. To Due to the seriousness of these allegations and the fact that the member was not present, Baloyi was questioned on this charge. Despite this, his evidence remained intact and was corroborated by the letter he produced as having been addressed to Mutama once he, Baloyi, realized that he had been duped and used according to his subsequent assessment. In all the circumstances, the evidence points only in one direction, and we accordingly find the member guilty of incitement of a staff member to steal organizational documents and also guilty of the related charge of receiving stolen organizational property knowing it to be stolen. Then we go to Lucky Twala. Twala faced one additional charge related to pointing a firearm. It is alleged that Twala breached the provisions of B119 of the code, in that on 17 February at the media conference in Sandton, he brandished or pointed a firearm at members of the public and the media. Firstly, there was insufficient evidence to sustain these allegations. Excuse me. Firstly, there was insufficient evidence to sustain these allegations. Moreover, and even if there was such evidence, it must be borne in mind that clause B1.19 prohibits participating in violent political, underlying political, activities without a valid justification, such as self-defense, provocation, etc. There is no evidence that if the gun was brandished at all, it was done for political reasons. If not, then this would be a matter for the police and not for the EFF to deal with. Also, it is arguable that the owners should shift to the EFF to prove the absence of a justification which was not done. For these reasons, the EFF has failed to prove the guilt of the member on a balance of probabilities. He is accordingly found not guilty on this charge. Due to the multiplicity of charges and charge members, and for ease of reference, a separate schedule will be provided to you in which the charges faced by each member and the finding of guilty or otherwise is summarized. Okay. All right. If the schedule is not here now, it will be emailed. But it's actually oh, it is here. It's a brief summary which will be put at the back of each. Right. That then was dealt with the issues to do with the convictions of each member, of all the charges, whether it was those charges that related to one or more or all of them, or those that related only specifically to a specific person. It now remains for us to pronounce upon the sentences or sanctions to be imposed in respect of those charges where a finding of guilty has been made. It has already been indicated that a second invitation was extended to the charged members to give evidence in mitigation of sentence in the event that they were found guilty of any transgression, which invitation was again turned down. In the circumstances and after the pronouncement of the verdicts, the NDC was only presented with evidence in aggravation led by the National Prosecutor, who called one witness, Mr. Gotish Kadi, the Secretary General of the EFF. The essence of his evidence was that the transgressions were serious, were very serious, and threatened the existence of the organization. As leaders of the EFF, he further testified during the interim period immediately preceding the NPA, and as MPs, the charged members were familiar with organizational documents and how to access them in general with organizational protocol. Indeed, he testified that Ramakatsa, as the erstwhile acting Secretary General and second in command of the EFF, was the previous custodian of organizational documents and the maintenance of discipline. With the exception of Twala, the charged members served in the highest decision-making structures of the organization. Those structures had been responsible for the organization of the NPA. The charge members had participated in the NPA until such time that they had failed to be elected into the Central Command Team's top 6 or had later declined nomination into the additional members there. Gadi further testified that the charge members had failed to exhaust internal remedies to air any grievance which they had and instead chose to air their problems on unauthorized public platforms, thus deliberately bringing the organization into disrepute and sowing disunity in its ranks. The failure to attend Parliament was a dereliction of their duties not only to the organization but to the approximately 1.2 million voters who had voted them into Parliament. The failure to obey their conditions of suspension showed a total defiance and non-recognition of the structures and discipline of the EFF. The derogatory and insulting statements made about the EFF leadership were false. He further testified that in the few days before the finalization of the NDC matter, the charge members, had further defied their suspension conditions by attending Parliament, but without making contact with the EFF's parliamentary leadership, such as the Chief Whip. Only Ramakata was not affected by this, as he had not attended Parliament. It was impossible or untenable to run the organization while these disruptions and activities were continuing. Their continued use of party clothing was causing confusion among membership. Thereafter, the prosecutor did not call any further witness. That summed up the evidence of Kadi in aggravation.